What are the four pillars of Bitcoin that make it work?
So these are what I think the four pillars of Bitcoin are. I'm sure there are people who will argue with me, but when I think about what are the foundational shelling points of the Bitcoin software, that if they changed, Bitcoin would cease to be Bitcoin. And for me, it's the 21 million supply hard cap. It's proof of work plus the difficulty adjustment. It's full backwards compatible, auditability. And from a design perspective, it's prioritizing decentralization over other design constraints. And so the reason that fourth one is subtle and important is that, there are other projects that check the first three boxes within, Bitcoin's history of forks, but none of them have chosen the fourth path, which is getting full nodes into as many people's hands as possible is the foundational priority, because without that auditability layer, we're just trading tokens.
What is the Bitcoin monetary policy?
The Bitcoin monetary policy is dead simple and was set from day one. There will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin in existence, and the issuance schedule has been set the entire time. It has been proven with each of the last halvings.
What is a halving?
So a halving means that every 4 years, the amount of Bitcoin issued or minted per block gets cut in half.
Why is the 21 million hard cap so important?
Because Bitcoin foundationally provides certainty. And so when I send one Bitcoin to Pete, he knows that he now has it and there is no other authority within the system who can spend that Bitcoin. The same way that he knows that one Bitcoin is one out of 21 million that will ever exist. And so the ability to have certainty in the system without trusting anyone else is the value proposition of a hard cap supply money.
How many Bitcoin have been issued so far?
So far, there have been about 91.5% of the total Bitcoin that will ever exist issued. So somewhere above 19 million.
And when will the last Bitcoin be issued?
So the date exactly is not certain, but the last Bitcoin will be issued approximately in the year 2140. Every halving, you get half as much. And so over 12, 16, 20, 24 years, the amount that gets issued per block becomes exponentially smaller, or I guess logarithmically smaller for the math nerds, each time. And so we're going to trend asymptotically to zero and then hit zero in 2140.
What is auditability and why is that important?
If you ask a different Bitcoiner, it's one of their favorites. So Pierre Rochard is a hardcore auditability guy, and so what he taught me many years ago is that Bitcoin node software has the ability to check how many Bitcoin have been issued total, and the process of downloading the historical software and running your own Bitcoin node is in and of itself an auditing process, because the way that Bitcoin's cryptography works is that the cryptography of the first block informs the second block, and the cryptography of the second block informs the third block. And so therefore, if you were to change anything in the entire history of every single transaction that has ever happened on the Bitcoin blockchain, you would ruin the ability to run your own current node. And that's why having hundreds of thousands of nodes all over the world running the same software, validating all the transactions is required, is because if any node tried to steal 1 million Bitcoin for themselves, it would completely change what happens on the software, and they would be out of sync, they would be out of compatibility, and they would lose the ability to spend those Bitcoin because every other node would reject them. And so there's this universe of audits that are constantly happening, making sure that every transaction is valid, every transaction is truthful, and that the process by which I am able to use my Bitcoin's purchasing power is mine and mine alone ad infinitum.
Are Bitcoin transactions private?
No. Bitcoin transactions are not private. They're published to the blockchain, which is literally a huge public database. There are ways to engage in transacting privately, but the actual movement of the Bitcoin on the ledger is public.
What is proof of work?
So you may have heard something called mining or Bitcoin mining. Proof of work is the computing process that Bitcoin miners engage in to, number one, make Bitcoin, useful by adding new blocks of transactions to the blockchain, but it's also the way that they generate revenue because they get paid for their work in order to do this. And so what proof of work does or is it's the replacement for banks. It replaces, the bank teller inputting your check and moving a number in their database. What proof of work does is it creates a fair and open process by which there's becomes a free market for Bitcoin transactions to be added to the blockchain. And so proof of work is one of the sort of necessary components to keeping Bitcoin decentralized.
What are miners doing during this process?
There's a process by which miners are looking to find an approvable block. And so the metaphor that I use most often for this is actually a puzzle. And so what miners are doing is they're taking a 10,000 piece jigsaw puzzle and they're putting it together as fast as they possibly can. And if anybody's done, a big jigsaw puzzle, it takes bloody forever. But once you finish it, everybody who looks at that puzzle knows if it's done or not. And so what the miners do is they assemble this massively difficult, 20,000 piece jigsaw puzzle, and then they hold up the puzzle in front of all the different nodes. And the nodes are able to do the very easy task of deciding if the puzzle is complete or not. And so it's very easy for nodes to check. It's very hard for miners to finish the puzzle, and therefore the security and the unhackability of Bitcoin is extremely, extremely secure, just based on the way that this process functions.
Why is so much computational power required for the Bitcoin network?
The short answer is that there's not that much computational power needed for the Bitcoin network. You could run the whole Bitcoin network with one computer, but what's happened in the free market around Bitcoin is that Bitcoin is an enormously valuable thing, both one individually and $23,000, and also in aggregate, right? The economic power of Bitcoin, the system, is also enormous. And so because the market has told the world that Bitcoin is enormously valuable, there's a huge competition for miners to go get the Bitcoin available to them in exchange for providing their computing power.
Does Bitcoin mining have a negative impact on the environment?
Absolutely not. Bitcoin mining is one of the most powerful new economic signals that's being shown to power markets globally. And the implications of this are, number one, enormous rises in electric system efficiency. Number two, enormous expansion in the lowest cost form of electric generation, which we know that the marginal cost for wind, solar, nuclear, and hydro are all the lowest on a single kilowatt hour basis. And the existing assets and infrastructure get to be utilized in an enormously more beneficial way, the downstream implications of which are hugely positive sum for humanity, both environmentally and at a business level.
What is the difficulty adjustment?
So the difficulty adjustment is my favorite part of Bitcoin. It's the part of the system by which proof of work is governed. So if you're a car guy, if you've ever tried to drive like 150 miles an hour in a car that just came off the factory lot, there's a governor on the engine. And so what proof of work is it's the natural governor for Bitcoin's supply schedule. And so the reason that you can't issue Bitcoin ahead of schedule is because every 2 weeks or 2016 blocks, the Bitcoin system recalibrates around how much computing power is on the network over that previous period of time. And so this is this incredibly powerful concept that sounds simple, but it makes Bitcoin's monetary policy self-referential. Bitcoin doesn't have an oracle problem the same way that lots of these other, crypto technologies do, because there's nothing for its oracle to reference. It's self-referential. And so therefore there's no need for a trusted third party along another vector, right? You don't need market data. You don't need third-party information. Bitcoin is, and that is enough.